What is a critical conversation? If the consequences of this conversation are very serious, it is called a critical conversation. The second situation is that the emotions of both parties in the conversation are very intense and both parties are angry. For example, if you are arguing with someone, you are arguing loudly with someone. This is also called a critical conversation. Another situation is that there are big differences in opinions between the two parties. Any of these three situations is called a critical conversation. So how do we usually deal with these three situations? Have you ever reflected on yourself and said every time after a conversation, hey, I should have said this? Why do you tend to fail at critical moments? This comes from our experiences in primitive society. There is a discipline called anthropology. Anthropology is a special study of the impact of people's conditions in primitive society on our current behavior. Many of our current behaviors are basically habits developed in primitive society. In primitive society, when you encounter a dangerous situation, such as a tiger coming towards you, right? Or you are surrounded by a group of primitive people from other tribes, what is your first reaction? It is to fight or flee. No matter whether it is fight or flee, which direction will your blood flow? Blood will flow to the limbs, so your brain will go blank at this time. This is why many of us will find ourselves becoming very tongue-tied and not saying what we should say when we are faced with public speaking, talking to our boss, or proposing to our girlfriend. We used to participate in debates, and often after the competition, we would say that I should have said something so good. So this is called the fight or flight strategy. So fight or flight makes us all fall into a state of either being angry and offending the other party, or enduring it when we have a critical conversation. So the two common bad outcomes for ordinary people in dealing with this critical conversation are either offending the other party. If we mess up the matter, we will become particularly out of control, and then we will lose our composure. There is another situation where we just forget it, pretend it didn't happen, and avoid talking about it, right? So is there anyone who can do it well? The author of this book tells us that it can actually be done very well. What is the principle? You have to maintain 100% respect for the other person and at the same time be 100% honest. For example, conversations with children are often key conversations, talking about academic performance, his problems in making friends, his problems with playing games, etc. These are all key conversations. Conversations with spouses are often key conversations. Conversations with employees, to encourage or criticize employees, these are all possible key conversations. Conversations with competitors, conversations with partners, even conversations with bosses who are dissatisfied with you. Okay, this conversation where you want your boss to give you a raise. So learning these methods of key conversations can help us handle the skills of conversations between us and others at all times in all aspects of life. So how do we conduct this key conversation? The first step is to start over. What does it mean to start over? Before having a key conversation, you must first make some preparations, adjust your mindset, and calm yourself down. Then talk to the other person. So how do you manage your own heart? The first thing is that you have to know that all our troubles are not caused by others. When you think that all your troubles are caused by others, you will find that you are particularly prone to anger. Being angry is to find an excuse and reason, saying that it is his fault. If it were not for him, I would not be like this. So when we can know that our troubles actually have little to do with others, this is called the ABC principle in psychology, which is a cognitive model. A is the occurrence of an event, B is your opinion on this matter, and C is your stress state. For example, your child's grades are very poor, right? So you are under a lot of pressure. Then I would like to ask if all children with poor grades have parents with a lot of pressure? Not necessarily. Are there any parents who say it doesn't matter if my child doesn't do well in the exam, as long as he is healthy, I am happy, right? My child doesn't do well in the exam, but as long as he is in a good mood, I am happy to have such parents, right? What makes you stressed? Okay, it is your B, that is your view on your child's grades, that makes you stressed. So if you want to reduce your stress, what is the best way to reduce your C? Is it to change A or change B? Many people spend their entire lives trying to change C by changing A. When their husband has relationship problems, they send this private detective to keep an eye on him. And the old man here is in the hospital again. The old man's health is cured, but I get sick and hospitalized again. Isn't this person I'm talking about particularly miserable, right? Actually not. This is the life of an ordinary person. A normal person will encounter such problems in his life. When you always try to change C by changing A, your life will never be happy. Your life will always be in pain. You always think that if A changes, C will definitely change. In fact, the most important way to change your C is to change B and change your view of the world. So when you can learn to break this social inertia, you will not think that any of your unhappy moods are caused by others. In this way, you can return to the essence of the matter, rather than targeting the person who made you angry. Your distress is not caused by others. We must change our view of the world and then solve the problem rather than blaming others. So before the conversation, you must learn to ask yourself a few questions. The first question is, what is my goal for this conversation? The second question is, what goals do I want to achieve for the other person after this conversation? The third question is, what goals do I want to achieve for our relationship after this conversation? And finally, ask yourself, what should I do to achieve these goals? When you can finish asking these four questions, you will basically return to calm. At this time, I would like to remind everyone that during the conversation, you should always remember the meaning of the conversation. Do you know why many people suddenly lose their temper when talking to others? The reason is that at that moment, they have forgotten the purpose and meaning of the conversation. When you can always remind yourself of the meaning of the conversation, your emotions will not easily get out of control. When your emotions are really on the verge of getting out of control, you just need to remind yourself of the meaning of the conversation, and your emotions will gradually return to normal. The second requirement is that I hope everyone can be a dual core conversationalist. What is a dual core conversationalist? There are two cores in our brains. One core is responsible for processing the content of the conversation, and the other core is responsible for processing the atmosphere of the conversation. When you find that the atmosphere of the conversation seems to be wrong, and the other party seems to be a little nervous, what should you do? Have you ever seen many mothers nagging their children? The children are already completely impatient and say, I can't stand it anymore. Please stop talking. Is this kind of conversation effective? If you find that the other person is in a bad mood, you should reflect on whether what you just said was not respectful enough. Therefore, keep the atmosphere friendly during the conversation. When starting a conversation, the first step is to share the facts. When you are talking to someone, the thing that is least likely to anger them is the fact. Then the second step is to speak your mind boldly. Then the third step is to consult the other party's point of view. What if his point of view is very different from yours and I cannot agree with him? There is also a way to find common ground to express agreement. Well, let me briefly summarize the steps of the key dialogue. The first step is to start over. Know why you want to talk, and then always pay attention to observe. Pay attention to observe your own and the other party's emotions, and then ensure the safety of the conversation. If the conversation feels unsafe, use methods such as apologies, comparative explanations, and common goals to pull it back. Then control your thoughts. Don't let yourself get angry easily. Then state the facts. Then understand the other party. And finally, reach an agreement. This is the process of a key dialogue. Okay, thank you, everyone. See you in the next book.